Hey everybody, Greg Meskel here with you, USA Water Polo at Home Advanced. Thanks for joining us here on another Facebook Live chat. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to add your comments, questions in the chat. If you're watching on demand, thanks for watching after the fact. My guest here today, Marisa Reichardt, author of a brand new young adult novel that we don't usually feature that sort of stuff here on the Water Polo channel, but because there's a water polo tie, she's here with us. Marisa, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here today.
Excellent. We are thrilled to have you. And as I alluded to, this brand new book that we'll talk about in depth as we go, one of the real interesting things about us for it was, of course, that there is a water polo tie. We know what the sport is involved. Tell us a bit more about it and how it kind of ties into Aftershocks.
So Aftershocks is a young adult novel, meaning it's for teenagers, and it takes place after a 7.8 magnitude earthquake hits Southern California, the big one. That's not the matter of if, but the matter of when. And my main character, Ruby, is a high school senior water polo player, just about getting ready to play CIF in February, and hoping to go to Cal to play in college. And she is in a laundromat when this earthquake hits with a boy she just met named Charlie. And they both end up under the rubble of this toppled laundromat where they cannot see each other, they cannot touch each other, they can only hear each other. And as the days and hours and days, I should say, tick by, they maintain hope by sharing stories of their past, perhaps with outcomes they wish they could change, and their hopes and dreams for the future.
Excellent. And you hit on a lot of very water polo specific stuff right there in your description. I think people that might read a book and know that water polo is involved, they'll be a little skeptical. Water polo is a very proud group to say, okay, do they really know what they're talking about here? But you hit on CIF in February and going to Cal, so your credentials so far so good. It's exciting to hear that stuff. How did it end up? Why water polo, and how did it get in this book?
So I think for me with this book, I pretty much always have sports in my books. I've had a swimmer, I've had a skateboarder, a surfer, and water polo for this book specifically, this was my go all in on California book, you know? So it was, I mean, the big one's supposed to hit in California. So when I was thinking about, it was twofold. When I was thinking about what type of athlete I would put in the situation, it was definitely water polo for me because I'm so familiar with it. I've actually, my husband is a water polo coach and we've been together for decades. And we met because when we were in college, because he was actually my little brother's high school coach in Coronado, California, which has a really great water polo history. And so, I mean, I've been on the pool deck, I've traveled with teams. I've been, the one thing that writers will tell you is that they just do a lot of listening. And so I've been around water polo players a lot and taken it in, and just as a fan in the stands, you learn a lot. And so when it came around to like figuring out why a water polo player for this book, first of all, it was because it felt very Southern California. It's obviously a really dominant sport in California. I love that it's taking off in other places. I think that's so great to see. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put this person in a really dire situation that's going to require enormous physical and mental fortitude. And I mean, to me, it was like, okay, Navy SEAL or water polo player. I mean, it just felt like the right fit in every way.
Yeah, you tapped into, I think, something that a lot of people in the water polo community pride themselves on, and that ability to overcome adversity and to kind of handle things with a level of toughness. And we'll get into that a bit more. It was interesting you mentioned that all your books, and you've written others, you have more on the way, have a touch of sports. What is it about team sports or the sports experience that lends itself to telling a teen story?
I mean, for me, I was a swimmer in high school. When I was in high school, there wasn't a girls' water polo team yet. You played on the boys' team. And like I said, my brother was on that team, and that was not really where he wanted me to be. But I did play a little bit. And I think that for me, I a huge part of high school is sports. And I know that's not true for everybody. I mean, obviously there's band, there's drama, there's art club. I mean, whatever it is that you find to be your thing. But from what I observed, and specifically with the water polo players that I had around in high school and that I see now, I mean, they end up forging these lifelong friendships and these lifelong bonds. It's like brotherhood or a sisterhood. And I think that's so amazing and special, and is such a huge part of the high school experience that I feel like I'm not true to what I know of the high school experience if I'm not including sports in it and teamwork.
Very well said. And I think a lot of people relate to that. There's something about team sports that really brings people together, especially in a short period of time that you struggle to replicate as you grow older, right? You get past high school and college, and you never find that level of closeness unless maybe you're a professional athlete or on some other sort of team. But so you hit on a lot of good stuff there. You were talking about going all in California. It makes sense. SoCal, water polo, earthquakes, it all ties together. But how do you even get to that idea? What is the process to figure out, like, okay, I finished one thing, I'm on to the next? Is it reading other books, just looking around outside? How do you kind of come up with these ideas?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of a ripped from the headlines sort of writer. I mean, I do a lot of scrolling through my news feed on the phone, which right now feels like doom scrolling, but I just, a lot of ideas come from there. And as far as the earthquake thing, it was something I have written previous books that weren't published that are in a drawer and they will stay there forever. And in both of them, there's an earthquake that happens, but it's, just a chapter, and it's like a 3.3 rumbler and some people bond over it. And so it's like, it was this thing that was always playing around in my head. And then it became well, what if that's the whole thing? And that's when the story took off.
And this is indeed the whole thing you alluded to. For those that are not Californians or don't live in an area where earthquakes are prevalent, the size of earthquake you're talking about, as you said, the big one, this is a massive event, a true natural disaster that this area in the book will have to work through. We talked a little bit about the idea that water polo players like to be viewed as tough. They certainly know how to overcome adversity. What did you kind of learn about that? You'd been around the sport, it sounds like, a lot of your life, but I imagine this maybe required a closer examination of what you knew about water polo as you're writing about it. What did you learn about the sport and how people that play it would be able to handle adversity?
I mean, from what I've seen of the sport, it takes enormous physical and mental prowess to play it, and smarts, and thinking 3 steps ahead. And I just think that the mental and physical fortitude that Ruby has to conquer in this book is something that water polo players are very familiar with and have learned to deal with.
Why do you think people in general like stories where you have to overcome the odds and work through something challenging like a massive earthquake?
I think it's just, I mean, life is challenging, right? And it's really nice to see somebody overcome something so atypically enormous. Whether it's an underdog story or a heroic journey of slaying dragons, I mean, people want to see people succeed. And I mean, people who don't want to see people succeed, I think, kind of suck. I mean, we should all want each other to succeed and get the things out of life that we want. And so that's what I think the real tie is. And especially in YA, there's always a sense of hope. It sort of comes with the territory. And so there's something really gratifying about being able to write something hopeful, especially right now.
Yeah, more than ever. It was funny as we were talking about this interview and just looking over what the book was about. I almost had a laugh, right? Because it's like there's so much doom and gloom going on, and here comes an earthquake book having to overcome something else. But it does fit in, I think, where people are at a place where they would like to see someone figure it out and overcome something. And so that can be something fun, I think, to kind of lose yourself in a story like this, for sure.
Absolutely. I think it's a way to, I mean, sometimes reading a story that's so far away from what's happening can lend itself to figuring out the up close and personal things that are happening.
Whether it's water polo, swimming, whatever you're going to represent in a book, how important is it to authentically display that in the dialogue and the way that you describe it? What sort of work goes into that?
Oh, I mean, huge for me. The last thing I want to do is have somebody say something doesn't ring true. And will I always get it right and perfect? No, I won't. I mean, I can't get an earthquake right and perfect. I haven't lived through a 7.8 earthquake. I haven't been buried in the rubble. So, I cut myself some slack there. I have to do that as a writer. But I did I feel like obviously I have a really close connection to water polo where it's this everyday part of my life, but I was as careful and thoughtful with the water polo portrayal as I was with the earthquake portrayal and the search and rescue portrayal and everything that comes with that. And I think you're doing yourself and your readers a disservice if you don't put in the effort on the research.
When it comes to that water polo specific terminology or memories or whatever you might be describing in the book, are you bouncing things off your husband, one of the club athletes, say like, hey, how does this sound to you? How does that work?
Oh yeah. My husband read several drafts of this book and I said, please make sure that I don't sound wrong, and he was great because he's like, well, everyone's going to know I read it and I don't want to sound wrong either. So, he's had to take a little of that on. So yeah, absolutely. And, there were situations where I'd say, what would a coach say right here? Exactly. I'm thinking something like this. And he would give me, exactly what he would say. And it was actually a really fun sort of bonding process to have me writing about something that he's so closely connected to, and then me doing something that I love and kind of merging the two worlds. It was pretty cool.
Then the other side of the coin, the thing that you don't have an expert in the house to talk to about earthquake survival, search and rescue. You said you haven't been through these things. How do you get a better understanding of what that might look like, especially knowing that, right, it's going to be different every time one of these might happen. So what might happen in the past might not happen the next time.
Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of research as far as reading about like the Northridge quake of 1994, the Loma Prieta earthquake in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1989. I looked at Hurricane Katrina, the aftermath of that, and even things like 9/11, the search and rescue that went into 9/11. And then I just called upon every person that I know that had connections to something like that. And I'm pretty lucky because I do have my best friend in San Diego. Her husband is an EMT firefighter who also is trained in search and rescue. So he was clearly an enormous resource for me. I talked to various ER doctors who, we talked about what the protocol is supposed to be in the aftermath of this. But again, it's all, that's if our hospital's still standing kind of thing. And I have a friend that volunteers with the American Red Cross. So I was able to talk to her. And that was pretty much how I did it, like watching documentaries, listening to podcasts, reading old news stories, and talking to people that I knew.
We're talking to Marisa Reichardt, author here, brand new YA novel, Aftershocks, about a couple of strangers that survived an earthquake together. One of them, a water polo player, Ruby, the main character. And so that's why Marisa's here to talk to us more about it. The book is available on Amazon. We'll also hit on some other places where you can pick it up as we get to the end of our conversation. If you have any questions for Marisa about the book or putting together a story that we hope many will read involving water polo, feel free to add those in the Facebook comments. I have a couple of folks checking in here already, which is great. Thanks for joining us on Facebook Live. We talked about the process, the research, all that stuff that comes together. Now, obviously, you want people to read it. So we're talking to a water polo audience outside of obviously a tip of the cap to what it is that they do every day. Why might they gravitate towards a book like this, especially that younger age group?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of what we were talking about before, just that like it's nice to read a story where somebody overcomes like an intense atypical situation that requires mental and physical abilities to conquer it. And I also think that there's a lot, it's a character study, and with some really sort of deep themes that are touched upon of mother-daughter relationships and friendships, and navigating maybe when some of your friends are maybe making choices that concern you. And I just think that I hope that there's a lot of different reasons that it would appeal to a audience outside of water polo as well.
I know you spoke about the high school experience for you personally being linked to sports, and that's how that ends up in a lot of your stories. But in general, what is appealing about this genre for you? Why do you focus on this YA level of writing or
Oh my God.
style?
I love writing for teenagers. Like I really, to me, it feels like an honor that they let me in their club, because I mean, they are so smart, they're engaged, they're passionate. They know when something's not ringing true or genuine, and they will let you know. They are the best fans. And there's just something about the teen years, there's an immediacy to it where so much of what's happening is for the first time. Um, Whether it's, you know, first love, first breakup, first time going to a big dance, first time winning a CIF championship, but also things like starting to question maybe things that your parents believe. And I think that's when you first start to think, you know, I'm not so sure that I'm completely down with that. And what does that kind of dynamic look like? And I just sort of interested and fascinated by all of it. I don't know if it's still me trying to work out stuff. Like I feel like we're all still 17 in our heads sometimes. I do have a teenager in my house, so that's helpful. And I sort of just want to do right by her and her friends as well, and give them honest, true stories.
When people think of a successful book, I think they probably think broadly on the numbers or metrics behind it. How many books sold, or does it get a good review in a newspaper or a magazine? But you were talking about this very specific audience. You have obviously a teenager in your house that can tell you, hey, mom, bad, good, whatever it is. But how else do you get a sense that the group you're writing the book for has enjoyed the book?
Oh gosh. Well, now you're asking if I read my Goodreads reviews, which I don't think is a good idea for authors to do. The teen readers are really big on Instagram. There's a lot of bookstagrammers, and they will put up the most beautiful photos of your book that you can imagine. I don't have that talent. And I mean, usually when a teenager likes your book, they let you know, whether it's on Twitter or a DM, or they'll contact me through my contact page on my website. And I mean, those are just the best emails to get, knowing that something really connected. I mean, when somebody has told you, you wrote my favorite book, I mean, that's like, if only one person ever tells me that, that's amazing.
Very cool. Yeah, I can only imagine that must be an awesome feeling to, because there's so many books, so many authors, right? To be the favorite book, even one time through, really does solidify that impact. We were talking before we started about my dreams for where a good book can go. Can I get option to become a movie and become a bigger deal? Is that a thing you think about? I think in the water polo world, we're always thinking about, well, we want to grow the sport, we want people to see it as much as possible, and so however, by any means necessary, right? Can we get it in front of more people? So it's appealing certainly to always think about a movie that features water polo. How does that work? Books so often become movies. Is that a difficult process?
It has been difficult. I do have representation at William Morris for this book specifically. So if anybody out there is interested in adapting this book, let's chat. But yeah, I mean, it's, to me, It's so interesting, especially because I live in Los Angeles. And so a lot of times it's, well, when's your book going to become a movie? Like you talked about sales numbers and New York Times lists, and in LA, it's like, oh, you're successful if your book's a movie.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, well, I didn't, if I wanted to write a movie, I would have written a screenplay. I wrote a book to be a book. But specifically, I think of the 3 books that I've written, this one does feel personal for exactly that reason. I would love to see water polo on screen, either the small screen or the big screen. I don't think it's something that we see very often. I'm remembering back when the OC came out, and among the water polo community, there was all this chatter like, oh, there's water polo players in this. And my husband and I got so excited. We sat down and watched the premiere, and walking through campus, fully clothed down the hallway, tossing a water polo ball back and forth in front of the lockers, were the water polo players that we were supposed to be so excited about. And I just thought, that's not right. That's not how I remember water polo in high school. So yeah, I mean, I wrote this book with like the sincerest admiration and awe for water polo players. And I hope that I do right by them. And it would be even more incredible to do right by them by getting them representation on the big screen.
You hit on something interesting I want to ask you further about, the idea that this was a very personal book, given the role water polo plays in your house. Now that it's done, how did that process feel different than the other stories you've written, because you have such a close tie to water polo?
Yeah, I mean, I really want water polo players to like it. I mean, I want them to say, yeah, I relate to this. Yeah, I remember this. And so far that has been the case from the ones who have read it. Like I really did see things that reminded me of playing in high school, and people that aren't playing anymore that felt nostalgia about it. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it really does feel like the most personal of my books for me.
We did get a question here from the Facebook audience. You mentioned you were on the swim team. Do you recall what events you swam?
I swam 200 free and 100 breaststroke, and sometimes I was in the relays. I didn't swim great, but I swam with a lot of heart.
Excellent. You never know what questions we might come across. That's an important one to know. What events? Excellent. Where can people get this book, Marisa?
You can get it wherever books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your favorite independent bookstore, bookshop. But if you're interested in a signed copy, Pages, a bookstore in Manhattan Beach, which is pagesabookstore.com. I've been going and signing books over there, so that's always a great, awesome option.
And worth mentioning, since you mentioned Pages, you had a fun event with them last night digitally with Jordan Rainey, who people know from the women's senior national team and Stanford water polo. Just tell us about how that went and why that was fun to kind of talk with Jordan about the book.
It was so fun, and it was something different that I don't think was a typical approach to a book launch. And I mean, right now, everybody's doing things, everybody has to do their book launches digitally, virtually, I should say. And so I was like, well, what's something I could do that's a little bit different? And I remember Jordan playing in high school. She was an incredible player in high school. It was clear that she was going to go on to do big, amazing things. And so I reached out to her and just, would you be up for doing something a little different? And she's so amazing because she was totally game, and she jumped right in, and she was, I mean, I got so many texts last night from people saying, I'm just so in awe of Jordan. She should be a motivational speaker. That was so fun. She was so amazing. People were very impressed by her, as was I. So it was a fun, interesting event.
Very cool. A couple of other shout outs here. Luis Moreno, Ali King, Jack Bowen, all saying hello, enjoying the conversation here with you. Marisa, thanks to you guys for watching as well. Hey, this was great. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And again, you can get Aftershocks on Amazon and elsewhere, wherever you get your books, and Pages in Manhattan Beach if you want a special autographed copy from Marisa. Thanks again so much for the time, and best of luck. Hope we see it on the big screen sometime soon.
I do too. Thanks for having me. It was fun to see you on my little computer screen today.
Thanks.